So institutions age. They don't last forever, right? They were developed out of some very specific historical contingencies, reasons why, there's reasons why the institutions we have were the ones that developed, but they were not inevitable. And I know that when you grow up in a society, it's easy to think that they've always been there, and that they're the only, reasonable way we could have solved certain societal needs. But that's just the power of culture, right? Of these social constructs parading almost as a kind of natural force. But if we look through through history of different societies, we see that many different types of institutions existed, and many of them no longer exist. So, all the institutions that you're a part of today, they were there, before you were born. They'll be there after you die, but they have not always been there, and they will not always be there, right? Take like capitalism. That's been around for a long time. It's going to be around for a long time. It's not the only economic system that's ever existed, and it won't last forever, right? Now, it's hard to even wrap our brains around what could be next, right? Or take the United States government, right? It has not been there for all of time. That's obvious. And it will not be there for all of time, right? The Roman Empire lasted like 1,000 years. We're barely a quarter of that, right? But someday the United States of America will not exist. And that's true for every institution, not just governments and religions, but also, educational institutions, healthcare institutions. And I don't just mean the specific organizations, but the whole formulation of why society uses a certain, organizational structure, right? The whole system, right, if you will. And then there are some institutions that it's easy to think they've been around for forever because maybe they borrow a similar name, right? So the term marriage, for example, has been a label applied to many different types of arrangements, with different numbers of spouses involved, of same-sex and heterosexual, the expectations of gender roles. Is it more for economics? Is it more for love? So a lot of different formulations, actually different kinds of institutions, have used that same label of marriage, which sometimes gives it this additional power. But nevertheless, for an institution to survive long term, it needs a couple of things. So one of those are strong plausibility structures. And the other is regular worldview maintenance. So let's define those. So a plausibility structure is the set of ideas you hold and you have, or that are given to people in a society for why that institution is legitimate, right? So take religion. In the United States, most people historically have been Christian. That number is on the decline. And so that raises the question, okay, what is happening to the plausibility structures of this religion that is causing year after year these small downticks in number of people who say they participate or believe in that institution and play roles to keep it alive? It might be that the theology is no longer convincing, right? It could be that the politics are no longer attractive to people. It could be that they're getting their societal needs, maybe for social connection or some sense of reverence and awe, from other places. And so that institution is not meeting the needs that it once, had maybe a monopoly on. But there can be a number of reasons why. But the plausibility structure, ultimately the believability that it is the institution that you should go to for this certain need, that's being drawn into question for an increasing number of people. Now, at the individual level, we may not buy the plausibility structures of a certain institution, right? Increasingly, when I ask students if they plan to get married, right? But maybe I was just teaching social problems. We had a chapter on marriage and family, and I was surprised. Like a quarter of the students said they don't plan to get married at all. And that's a pretty big number. So it means there's something in the plausibility structure of marriage even that is being drawn into question in society. And maybe they'll change their mind later, maybe not. But that draws a kind of threat, a precarity to that institution, right? And then worldview maintenance is the other. So as a participant in an institution, you have to regularly participate to keep your worldview strong. Right, so think of an institution that you very much are a part of, right? Maybe you're an employee at a certain company, or you're a believer in a certain religion, or you're a spouse to a certain partner. you have to regularly do things to almost ritualize the role you play, right? So most spouses, they sleep in the same bed, or they might kiss each other goodbye or hello when they see each other again. They might daily say "I love you" to each other, share bank accounts, and have meetings about their finances, or raise kids together, right? But imagine a long distance couple who never has kids, who doesn't merge their finances, that does not live together, and sometimes it goes days, weeks, maybe even months without talking. And they're married, but the role of spouse is not going to be a very strong one for them, right? They're going to have to do worldview maintenance to even feel like that's their spouse, that this isn't just increasingly becoming some stranger, right? Imagine, okay, boyfriend or a girlfriend, one moves away to college, and they talk on the phone regularly, but then that starts to drop off. Whole gaps in communication happen. At a certain point, you wonder, like, is this even my girlfriend or boyfriend? Like, did they just move on and not tell me, right? You start to question it, right? Or maybe you were very religious growing up. Then you moved away to college, you stopped going to church. Nobody in your friend group is religious, but when you grew up, everybody was the same religion. And so you're not going to mass, or you're not going to temple, or whatever it is. And it just starts to feel more distant, less relevant to your day-to-day life, right? So maybe out of some kind of guilt or to make your parents happy, you'll decide to go or attend. But more likely, it's when you go back and visit home. That's when you'll do it, right? Because that's where the plausibility structures are stronger, because, my parents go, so I'll go with them. Then you see your old youth pastor and your friends, and it suddenly starts to feel more real to you a little bit. But then you go back to school for the next semester, and that distance, that gap starts to open up again. Right. And so this can happen for any institution. It's not just the plausibility structures that make it believable that the legitimacy is deserved. It's also the routine, almost ritual-like behavior that you have to participate in on a regular, if not daily basis, to feel like you're a part of that. Right? Imagine you're employed somewhere, but you just never go into the office, and they never call you, and they don't send you a paycheck. But nobody said you're fired. At a certain point, you're like, do I work here or not? Right? Now, most institutions don't let you just drift that, without any communication, drift away from your role, because institutions need you to play your role for their own health and thriving. So in many cases, there's pressure, if not even some mild forms of coercion or stigma, to encourage you not to drift away. But in any case, that regular routine maintenance is important to make that institution seem real. Because, again, institutions are just aggregate patterns of collective human behavior, right? It's just language and habits and routines. It's not as material as like a rock or the ocean, right? And so when things that are socially constructed, if they're not regularly practiced, they can start to feel softer. They can start to become less real, right? So remember, we said that to say something is socially constructed is not to say it's not real. It's to describe the source of its reality, and that is from human culture. But things that are developed by human culture are dependent on repetitious patterns of behavior, language, norms. And if those start to unravel, the realness of that institution will start to fade with it.